Hey, hi, what's up? It's Emma. So, I am currently reading The Body Keeps the Score. I started it like over a year ago and then never went back to it, and now I'm restarting it. And I was reading a chapter the other day, and it was talking about the self sensing system of the brain and just how trauma tends to numb it. It's very important because without it, it impacts emotion and then housekeeping functions, simple things like sleeping, hunger, and appetite. And then that got me thinking, I'm like, okay, there's always this topic of debate now, and there's so many buzzwords and buzz things out there, and one of them tends to be cortisol. And how, oh my gosh, there's something in my eye. And just how cortisol tends to affect weight loss by having elevated levels that don't allow us to lose weight. And you have people on one side that say, okay, hey, that's essentially bullshit. It's not enough. It's not a big enough factor. The likelihood is that you're in more of a calorie surplus than you think you are, and you're not in enough of a calorie deficit to lose weight. And I see that side of things. But I also see the other side where there's just not enough evidence to concretely say if cortisol does or does not affect it. I mean, there's more evidence now than what there was, and there's research done, but there isn't enough research. So it's like, I listen to people like Lane Norton and Andrew Huberman and all that stuff, and I want to hear their sides of things, but I don't allow it to dictate how I view things. I use it as information, and there's some stuff that I'm like, yeah, I definitely agree with that. There's other things where I'm like, I can see both sides of the coin. I would say this is one of those where I see both sides of the coin. I think that as of right now, there's still a lot of validity in the fact that most people are eating in a caloric surplus and they don't realize it. We eat calorically dense foods, and we might not think that we're eating a lot, but we're actually eating a lot from a calorie perspective. We're just not getting satiated from that food. And then there's other sides of it where you are eating too much from a calorie perspective and you are eating a lot of food. But not to get too deep into that, I essentially just wanted to touch on the fact that for me, I kind of stand in the middle, because this passage brought this thought back up to me in the sense of we really don't know enough. I don't remember when this book was published, but I know it hasn't been that long since it's been out. And granted, he's been doing this research for quite some time, but there is still so little that is known about the mental workings of the human body and how it affects the physical body. And this was kind of a breakthrough in how a lot of that stuff is affected, and I've still only gotten halfway through it. But I just don't think you could realistically say that the cortisol and other things have no effect in someone's, or not a big enough effect in someone's ability to lose weight or achieve their goals or, be healthier. I mean, it said it right in that passage. Things like sleep, hunger, and appetite were affected. And that's just from something being shut off by trauma that most people don't even know is shut off. It's a very newly found thing of the brain. I feel like I'm not talking fully coherent, but to note here, this is my thoughts on things. I have no research or background or, any context in this. I mean, I have my training background, I have an understanding of it, and I have my own past and my own history, and trauma affected me in different ways. But I feel like that's why I wanted to say that I sit on both sides. I definitely think there's still a major factor in the fact that we probably do have too much of a caloric surplus, but I don't believe we have enough evidence to completely negate the fact that cortisol and other hormones are affected by states of the mental that we don't fully understand. We're only learning how to understand it. And then you could go down the rabbit hole of like women's bodies. Women's bodies have only been in the body of science for like the last 30 years. And even most of that is minimal. And when you look at studies, there's still a majority of men in those studies versus the women. And so there's just not enough evidence to be concrete on a lot of things. I mean, I feel the same way if you want to go down the rabbit hole of different chemical additives and things like that. And, I listened to Lane Norton on, I forget what he went into on the debate of Diet Coke. But essentially, he came to the conclusion with his research that you'd have to consume a obscene quantity of Diet Coke daily to actually prove the research stating how bad it is correct. And, I see that. And I'm not the person to think that you shouldn't ever drink Diet Coke or soda or have these things. It's more just, again, having things in moderation. I think the biggest thing, to take away from this video is seek out information, but also maintain your own opinion about said information. Don't allow one person saying, this is right, this is how it is, that is bullshit, that has no validity, stop listening to it, be the dictating factor to what you believe. I think you can sit on both sides of the coin. I feel like I sit on both sides of the coin to a lot of things in my life, but that's because when it comes to health in our bodies and the function, there is not a lot of concrete answers. As of right now, there's still so much that we don't understand. I mean, fitness didn't take off in the way that it is now, except in the last 10 to 15 years. Before that, it was the Arnold Schwarzenegger era and bodybuilding and all this stuff. And now we're getting into more how things function and the ability to move without pain and be more functional inside of life, not just aesthetic. And there's so many paradigms and so many shifts that happen that I think you really just have to keep an open mind. You can be set in your ways about some things, but at the same time, be willing to listen to differences of opinion because it could spark a change, I know people like Lane who have even admitted they felt one way about one thing 10 some years ago, and now they feel a completely different way. And they'll admit, at that time, that's the way they felt, versus now they feel a completely different way. So kind of all of this is to say weight loss, health, all those things, it can be a very complex issue. It can be really freaking simple too, but it can also be really freaking complex. I mean, it can be as simple as move more, eat either a little bit less, or work with somebody to figure out where your calories actually are versus where your energy consumption needs to be, and make sure that the calories in are less than the calories out until you get to a place where you want to maintain. And then, strength training is important. Muscle is essentially a way to reverse aging. And we need a balance of weight training and mobility. So you got your Pilates, your yoga, stretching in general. And then you also need, your aerobic capacity, whether that's you want to go play pickleball on the weekends with your friends, or you want to go for runs, bike rides, whatever it is, but something that gets your heart rate up and pumping and moving, different from just daily life. But it can also be very complex in the fact that you could be doing a lot of things right and still not see the progress and results you want to see. PCOS is like a perfect example of that. That's something that still is so limited in knowledge, and even then there's so much variance in how it affects each individual person that it's hard to go off of, and it's hard to find, and it's not easy for a lot of people to have the doctors that are actually helping them find that. And then it gives them answers to a lot of these complex issues that nothing was working. They were doing all of this stuff right, and it still wasn't working. And so all of that is to say there could be more underlying issues than just a simple caloric deficit issue, or the lack thereof a caloric deficit issue. So keep an open mind, be willing to hear both sides of the story to formulate your opinion, and don't be afraid to start over a lot of times while you're figuring out what equation works for you and your body, because it's different from your friend, it's different from your mom, it's different from your sister. Even the people that are genetically tied to you, there's still a drastic difference in how their body's going to respond to something versus how your body's going to respond to something. So keep an open mind and keep trying. I know it can be challenging, and I just hope we continue down the path of more research, more understanding, being open to different topics, and especially more research into women's health and just how mental health can affect the physical body in ways that we don't fully understand. And please, fitness professionals, make sure to keep that in mind. If there's something that you feel like you're giving the best formula to your patients and it's not working out to what it needs to be, don't hesitate to think about referring them to someone that can help from the mental health standpoint. It's not in our toolbox. So that's when you got to send it out to someone else. But have a great week. Catch you next week. Peace out, Girl Scouts.